MoWrOwInfow in the house. Today the topic is how to know if someone is truly spiritual, which is a prerequisite to becoming a teacher. By teacher I mean a spiritual teacher, which is the highest form of teacher, basically a Brahmin. Now, it's really important to know that a spiritual person doesn't have to be poor. They can be rich. They can enjoy luxury. The difference is between a rich spiritual person and a rich material person is whether that spiritual person can live without all that materialism, all that comfort. So, as you see in the chakra chart, the energy centers are in the center. So, a person who is spiritual should be able to enjoy materialism, but also be able to enjoy non-materialism. So they should be able to cope with discomfort. And they should at least put effort to it regularly. I don't mean just prove it to himself. And yeah, they should prove it to themselves, not to people. It's about conquering or mastering yourself. So, for example, I'm considered spiritual by many. Even spiritual people or people that practice spirituality, I'm considered pretty decent, at a decent level. For example, what I do is, I do have comforts. Like, look at this big bed, laptop, a recliner, which I sometimes put my clothes on, PJs basically. And what I do is to make sure that I'm comfortable and happy without materialism, which is, by the way, very important for manifesting materialism. If you want to manifest money, you get to be happy now. If you always need money, you're going to always attract needing money. So what I do is I sit on the floor all the time. This, I don't know, I just got it from another flat. It's just an extra chair. However, I do use it. I enjoy it. But basically to take a break. If I'm really tired, I've been fasting for 3-4 days and I'm aching, back hurts, head hurts, I just use it to take a break if I must. So the idea that person should have put effort and regular effort and prove it to themselves they can. They'll be happy without materialism. So, for example, also fasting is important. Minimum 3 days. I've done 4 or 5 with strenuous exercise, up to 3 hours a day. Risky exercise, even like parkour and a bit of acrobatics. I've even bled at times. But you got to make sure that person, to really know that they're spiritual, that they've put a good amount of effort. And to some extent, they've achieved it. For example, okay, so someone tells you they're spiritual and all they need is food and shelter. There's a lot of food that can do a lot of harm to the body and others, especially animals. Considering the urban environment we're in and how much destruction we cause because of farm factory. But, and shelter? Come on. There's a lot of things you can do with shelter if you got money, with water and electricity. You don't have to deal with hot weather, cold water. You don't have to read, you don't have to think, you can just watch videos all day. It's not so impressive, to be honest, to be able to live with just food and shelter. However, it is a little bit step higher than most people. I think that just need to always travel, need to always go out, need to always see people, see friends, hang out, and need to go to restaurants and parties. It's a bit better. And seeing someone who can read, that's pretty impressive to me compared to the average that people never reading, or even an article, a couple of words, a paragraph is difficult. However, it's still pretty lame for someone to tell you all he needs food and shelter. That's not really spiritual. Okay, so you have to put effort. For example, when I have the ability, I have the capacity to travel. So when I used to travel, now I don't feel like it. But when I used to really put effort. Like I went to a campsite, stayed there at the camp with public services nearby, like cafe, restaurant. But I stayed in a tent every day, minimal electricity, minimal water, and minimal people around. I've stayed there for like a month in just a tent. Then I progressed a little bit. I stayed in a mountain with even less people, less public services, and cafes, restaurants that take me like an hour to get to by walking, like which are much further. And I've endured that. For me, I mean, living in an urban environment is a bit of a challenge, and having to endure the cold weather in the tent because the tent doesn't shield you completely in a mountain. It's pretty cold. And then I progressed from that to solo camping. I went to a place where there's no people around, and in the mountain as well, very cold, and there's no public services, pretty much. I just relied on nature for water and food for 3 days. I didn't do more than 3 days. Pretty lame, but I should. From that, I tried progressing a little bit to stealth camping. That is, I camped again solo without anyone. I've done that for also 3 days or so. So without a tent, okay, pretty scary, and pretty cold because again it was in the mountains. So the idea is to really know if someone's spiritual, if you are, is to take progressions, and whatever discipline you take up, be it yoga, parkour, ninjutsu, whatever, it should help you with that. See, the ultimate aim of training, of any discipline you take up, is to be able to be detached. So you can really experience those elements, those chakras. You got to be detached and to be able to manifest without having to work so hard and all day, sacrifice friendships in your life. And you know, you got to be able to be not attached, but at the same time not resistant. If you remember, the elements are in the center, energy centers. So you should be able to enjoy everything. If you got materials, if you got the capacity for it, why not? However, in materialism, there's a lot of destruction we do, more than if you live in nature. So you got to be able to compensate for that. You have to be able to influence people. However, to be able to influence, you got to be yourself. You've proven to yourself that you can endure long days without food, cold water, hot weather, cold weather, many days without people. And then you can influence people. I mean, just because you have knowledge, you can impart that knowledge to people, but it's not going to make a difference unless you yourself really, have experienced these elements, and you can really inspire people to go forward beyond the limited body mind into the unlimited spirit. MoWrOwInfow. Back to spirituality in materialism.